To understand why the sky turned black in 1952, one must first look at the ground. It was a ground covered in the dust of a Pyrrhic victory. 7 years had passed since the end of the Second World War, but London was not yet a city reborn. It was a city held together by scaffolding and stoicism. The skyline was a broken jaw of missing teeth. Bomb sites from the Blitz still lay uncleared, overgrown with fireweed that thrives on scorched earth. Britain was a conqueror, but it was a bankrupt one. The war had drained the national coffers dry. To pay off the crushing loans from the United States, the government under Winston Churchill had to sell everything of value it possessed. The most valuable thing Britain had was coal. Deep beneath the valleys lay seams of high-grade anthracite, black gold. But the government made a decision that would seal the fate of thousands. The good coal would be exported to heat the homes of Paris, Rome, and New York. For the people of London, there was what was left. They called it nutty slack. Nutty slack was the sweepings of the mine floor. It was soft, brown, and crumbly. But it had a dark secret. It was rich in sulfur, and it did not burn so much as it suffocated. When you threw a shovel of nutty slack onto a fire, it didn't roar, it hissed. It released a thick, reluctant smoke, heavy with tar and fly ash. In December 1952, London was a city powered by fire. 8 million people burned coal in open hearths. And right in the heart of the metropolis, monolithic power stations loomed over the River Thames. Battersea, Bankside, Fulham. The city was a machine designed to produce smoke. It was a loaded weapon. All it required was the wrong weather. The winter of 1952 had arrived with malice. By the first week of December, the temperature plummeted. Puddles in the cobblestones turned to sheets of black ice. The breath of the city turned to steam. Meteorologically, the stage was being set with terrifying precision. On Thursday, December 4th, a massive anticyclone drifted over the southern coast of England and parked itself there. In London, wind is the great cleanser, but under the heavy hand of the anticyclone, the wind died. The smoke rising from the chimneys did not drift away. It went straight up, slowed, and stopped. Usually air gets colder the higher you go, but that night a layer of warmer air moved in, sliding over the top of the cold surface air like a blanket. This created a temperature inversion. London was now trapped inside a box. Into this sealed box, the people of London continued to shovel their coal. The smoke rose, hit the lid of warm air, and finding no escape, it mushroomed. It spread out and began to sink back down. The trap was shut. Sink back down. The trap was shut. Friday morning began with a deception. The sun rose into a blue sky above the inversion layer, but down in the streets, the light was strange. It was yellow. Londoners were used to fog. They called it a pea souper because of its greenish yellow hue. But this was different. By noon, visibility dropped to a few hundred yards. By 3 p.m., the street lights flickered on, dim, orange halos floating in a sea of grime. The fog was not just water vapor. It was smoke. It was soot. People walking along the Strand noticed the taste first. It was sharp and acrid. It caught in the back of the throat. It smelled of coal tar and rotten eggs, the telltale signature of sulfur dioxide. "It's thick tonight," a receptionist remarked. "It's the coal," a doctor muttered. "Everyone's got their fires banked up high." They fed the beast that was eating the light. When London woke on Saturday, the city had vanished. The density of the smog on the second day defied belief. In many parts of the capital, visibility was reduced to zero. Not poor visibility, zero. You could not see your own feet. The transport network suffered a cardiac arrest. The red double-decker buses ground to a halt. Conductors were forced to walk in front of the buses, holding burning flares. They acted as human lighthouses, shouting directions to the drivers inches behind them. "Left a bit, Bill. Easy now." Eventually, the bus companies surrendered. The city became a graveyard of abandoned vehicles. The only thing moving was the London Underground. But even the tube wasn't safe. As the doors opened, the smog drifted down the escalators, filling the tunnels with a hazy, sulphurous mist. For the pedestrian, the city became a labyrinth of terror. Landmarks were gone. People hugged the walls of buildings, trailing their fingers along the brickwork to guide them. The silence was the worst part. The smog acted as an acoustic damper. It swallowed sound. The only sound was the coughing. By Sunday, the fog had changed character. It was no longer just smoke. It was a chemical weapon. The science was terrifyingly elegant. The sulfur dioxide gas mingled with particulate matter. These metal particles acted as a catalyst. They created sulfuric acid. The fog that wrapped London on Sunday was an aerosol of dilute sulfuric acid. Every time a Londoner took a breath, they were inhaling a mist that burned the lining of their throat and lungs. The medical crisis began in the living rooms. The acid irritated the bronchial tubes. The body produced mucus to protect itself. But the irritation was constant. The airways narrowed. It was a slow, agonizing suffocation. They were drowning in their own fluids. The ambulance service collapsed. Dispatchers were forced to give grim advice. "We cannot come to you. You must try to make your own way." Fathers wrapped their choking children in blankets and carried them on their shoulders, walking for miles through the freezing, blinding acid fog. When they arrived at the hospitals, they found the gates of hell. Patients were lined up on the floor. In the pediatric wards, the sound was unbearable. It was a chorus of high-pitched, rattling gasps. While the human tragedy unfolded, the animal kingdom offered a visceral display of the smog's lethality. Massive bulls and prize cattle at the Smithfield show began to bellow in distress. They began to collapse. Farmers soaked rags in whiskey and wrapped them around the noses of the cows. It was a futile gesture. Dozens of prize cattle died on the straw. Outside, the birds were dying. Blinded by the smog, they crashed into walls and moving trains. People reported the crunch of small bones under their feet. Monday brought no relief. The smog provided the ultimate cloak of invisibility for the criminal element. Smash and grab raids became an epidemic. A thief could walk up to a jewelry store, throw a brick, and step back 3 paces. He was gone, disappeared. But the true horror was the logistics of death. Undertakers ran out of coffins. Mortuaries were overflowing. Bodies were lined up in chapel corridors, wrapped in paper sheets or curtains. The city's infrastructure of grief had collapsed. In Westminster, the government's instinct was self-preservation. It's just a fog, they said, a natural phenomenon. To admit the truth that their policy was killing the electorate was unthinkable. They told the press it was an influenza epidemic. It's the flu, they said, not the smoke. But the doctors knew, and the people coughing up black phlegm in their freezing bedrooms knew. On the morning of Tuesday, December 9th, a weather vane on a church steeple in Greenwich creaked. It turned. A breeze sprang up from the west. The fresh Atlantic air pushed against the stagnant block. The lid was lifted. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the great yellow cloud began to move, drifting out toward the North Sea. As the air cleared, the city was revealed. It was a city dipped in ink. Everything was black. The great smog was over. The aftermath was a slow realization of horror. Initial reports claimed 4,000 deaths, but modern research places the true death toll closer to 12,000. 12,000 men, women, and children, killed by the air they breathed. The public outcry was furious. They had not fought Hitler only to be gassed by their own fireplaces. 4 years later, Parliament passed the Clean Air Act. It was a revolutionary moment. For the first time, a government asserted the right to control what its citizens burned in their own homes. The air of London, thick with smoke since the Middle Ages, began to clear. The pea souper passed into history. The Great Smog is the birth of modern environmentalism. It demonstrated that the atmosphere is not an infinite dumping ground. It showed that air pollution is not a nuisance, but a public health emergency. Today, as distant cities struggle with their own winter smogs, the lessons of London in 1952 remain terrifyingly relevant. The only difference is the source of the smoke.